This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of DocNJock. Right smack dab in the middle of summer. Technically today, as you're listening to this, one of the slowest days in the world of sports. The MLB All-Star Game happened. There's no NBA. Football is right around the corner. So there really are no sports to discuss in terms of live action, but tons of news and nuggets and reactions that Doc and Jock got to give this week regarding Steve Yzerman, who we never doubted. We never had any doubts that Yzerman and the Yzer plan would come to fruition and land the big guy. I just think he needed a little bit of prodding online from one of the noted podcast networks, needed a little bit of poking to move this along. But in the end, the Red Wings did what they needed to do. And the Pistons making some moves, getting a chance to catch early game action of Asar Thompson and Sasser in the Summer League. And it's a great time now in Detroit to kind of recap things and look at the Detroit Tigers, who maybe took a gamble. And maybe now looking at their philosophies, you're starting to maybe get your first glimpse of what Scott Harris may be doing in regards to drafting in terms of the long view. Get ready for that. We'll see if Adam is ready to take the long view with high school cats in the world of baseball. But I'm going to give you the floor. I know you're happy. I had a feeling that, potentially when we were looking at Steve Yzerman and Alex DeBrincat, that it might have been a long time because Steve Yzerman put the flag down and said, look, when you look at it logistically, he had all the leverage. DeBrincat didn't want to be with Ottawa. And Steve Yzerman's like, okay, if he doesn't want to be there, not a lot of teams really have the flexibility to give $8, $9, $10 million a year deals. I have a number, and it's probably going to be south of $8 million. And call me when you're ready. And he can go about his business, and Ottawa can him and haw and come back with more offers. And Steve Yzerman's like, no, I think this is where I'm going to look at short term. I don't want to give up any of my frontline players. You're not going to get the number 9 pick. So call me back. And Ottawa hims and haws, and they're like, can we at least get a player? And Yzerman's like, okay, fine, you can get Kubalik. Understand, you need somebody that can score to make it somewhat even. But, hey, he gets the benefit of the doubt with the first-round pick next year being under control of the Red Wings, so they can have the higher of the first-round picks, depending on how it all shakes out with Boston. So, in the end, we got to give kudos to Steve Yzerman, who made the deal. He made a move. And that's all we can ask for. He made a move. He a guy that can score 40 goals, that can play on your frontline power play, first line winger, maybe pair ups, maybe even improves Dylan Larkin. So it's win-win across the board. And we sit here today on a Thursday, thrilled to welcome back a hometown guy, Alex DeBrincat. Come back home and put the puck in the net. And I think because you can agree, the buzz around the Red Wings probably reached an all-time high, at least in the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think so as well. This is one of those things where you look at the trade that Yzerman pulled off, right? And kind of going back to draft day, you start to understand the plan now. You kind of understand what happened. We were questioning different things. I don't think we necessarily lost faith in Steve Yzerman, but we were a little bit shaken, and we were getting a little bit agitated, and we were a little bit annoyed. Like, come on, just pull the damn trigger already. But you see what his patience got you. His patience were completely rewarded. Steve Yzerman going into these negotiations obviously had the upper hand, obviously had the leverage. Things Steve Yzerman doesn't like to do. Doesn't like to sign guys to 7-8 year long deals. Doesn't like to give players more than $7.5, $8 million. So there was a little bit of flexibility he had to show when he re-signed DeBrincat to a 4-year extension at $7.875 per year. So comes to this agreement. They still have a little bit over $8 million in free agent money that they can go out and spend. There are guys out there that they're still looking at. So they have some wiggle room to still add more pieces. You now have your guy. You have a star on your team. You have a guy who is going to make other guys better. We've been clamoring for a first-line player. That's what Alex DeBrincat is. He is a first-line player. Look, I didn't necessarily want them to give up Dominik Kubalik, but understand what's going on here, right? This is a guy who is going to be a free agent after next year. You had to give something to get something, so you give him up, and obviously you get what is better in the deal. On top of that, you gave up a prospect that I'm not sure is going to make the NHL. And if he does make the NHL, I'm not really sure what his role is going to be. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out. He might end up being an absolute stud later on down the line. But for right now, you got what you wanted. You got the guy who was a legit star in this league. And then you look at the draft pick. It's a conditional draft pick. Like, the Red Wings have 2 draft picks next year, and they have to give Ottawa the worst draft pick that they have in the first round. Like, what kind of Jedi mind trick is Steve Yzerman playing? I think you have to applaud Steve Yzerman for what he's done. He's taken a lot of slings and arrows over the course of, maybe 2 weeks now, with a lot of people calling for action and calling for movement. He ends up waiting. His patience is rewarded. If you're a Red Wing fan and you were a little bit shaken by the lack of movement, I think you now have to take a closer look at what Steve Yzerman's doing, how he's trying to build this thing. And I think your disbelief in Steve Yzerman has kind of been restored. I think you now have a better understanding and you have a better respect of what he's trying to do. And look, I think what happens now going forward, looking at this team, the addition of Alex DeBrincat, to me, it is playoffs or bust for this team. I think Alex DeBrincat coming to the Detroit Red Wings instantly makes this team a playoff contender. Now, if you listen to a couple of different interviews he's done, he talked about his time with Chicago, where he was with Chicago. They had a really good team on paper. Things kind of fell apart. These things happen. Sometimes the locker room doesn't mesh well. Sometimes injuries happen. There are things that can derail you. But I think going into the season this year, the expectation is playoffs. And it's not just sneaking into the playoffs. It is being a legit playoff contending team. It is getting into the playoffs and it is making noise. If your expectation isn't there, I need you to explain to me why it's not there. Because I believe with this addition, automatically your first line gets 10 times better. I think your first line power play gets better. You go back and you look at some of the moves that he made during adding Shane Gostisbehere, I think that makes your power play better. So by making your first line better and making your first line power play better, that instantly makes your second line better. That makes your third line better. That makes your second line of your power play better as well. DeBrincat's also been on record of talking about how his 200-foot game has improved, and he's looking to improve that. That's good to hear. This is a player who is very self-aware. This is a player who kind of hears some of the talk about his plus-minus not being great. This is a guy who hears about how all he is just an offensive player. He realizes that he has to play defense here. This is a team where it is generally defense first, offense second. He is obviously an offensively gifted player, so it's going to be working all of this into conjunction. And like I said, your team automatically gets better. With the addition of Alex DeBrincat, do you believe that this team is playoffs or bust?
Yeah, they have to be playing meaningful games late in the season to try and make the postseason. I think that's the reason why you do it. You obviously have a need in terms of consistent scoring. And DeBrincat, 25 years old, has the opportunity now to come home. And I think what a lot of general managers in Detroit, and it's clear, intangibles really also factor into the decisions that are made. DeBrincat wants to be in Detroit. And when you want to be somewhere, you just go all out. You want to make it work. He recalled in all the interviews that, hey, I remember the Wings winning the Cup and Lidstrom and the times that you and I grew up watching the Wings. All those great memories with Darren McCarty and all that. Those were the primetime years when these kids are growing up, or at least in their early years learning about hockey. You learn about the Wings era under Yzerman, and DeBrincat is from Farmington Hills. He knows about the history of the Wings. So to get a guy that wants to be part of your rebuild, I just can't give Steve Yzerman enough credit to not even overpay for it. You know, a lot of these athletes are going to ask for the world. He obviously could have asked, for $8.5 million. And Steve Yzerman's like, look, here's an opportunity that can be a plus for you. Alex, which is, hey, you ball out for us and you put the puck in the net, you score 30 goals for the next 3-4 years. At 29 years old, easily you'll get 7 years. Easily you'll get 5 years at least, making $8-9 million a year. Prove it. 7.5 is nothing. 7.875, I believe, is nothing to scoff at. And within the framework of, hey, we got to pay Larkin at the top and you got to be below within the framework of our cap. So I think that there was a little bit of a willingness by DeBrincat to take a hometown deal to come back to Detroit, and Steve Yzerman took full advantage of it. So the dude's playing chess, and I love it. Yeah. I love getting a good player at a little bit of what can be considered a fraction of the cost. You and I love that. And, sure. and I think that it improves the team in a lot of ways. But we have to look at things from all angles. Do you think in any way that some of the concerns that people had in terms of plus minus, his size and stature, maybe some of his defensive weaknesses, is that going to be a problem for a team, obviously like the Wings, who struggled a little bit on defense? Are there any cons or any glaring issues that you would see from adding this player to the Wings?
I don't think so. Look, he seems incredibly self-aware. He understands what is being said about him. He understands what's being written about him. I think he can come in. I think he will slot in. Obviously, this is a guy who wants to be here. There was one name at the very top of his list, and it was the Detroit Red Wings. This is where he wants to be. I think he's going to get on the same page as the coaching staff. He's going to get on the same page as the organization. I think you will see his defense improve. I think he will get better. I think he will work at that. I think with the addition of him, as far as the team goes, I think you get a better insight as to what Steve Yzerman did during free agency. To me, looking back on what Steve Yzerman, how he conducted himself during free agency, he knew he was going to get this deal done. He didn't necessarily know when he was going to get the deal done, but he knew this deal was getting done, and he had to bring it coming. There was no rush at the draft, right? And Detroit was flushed with draft capital. No rush. This is a really good draft. I'm going to spend all these assets I have. I'm going to spend all this in this really deep draft, and I'm going to add to my coffers with some of these young guys. And then you look at how he conducted himself during free agency, and we were all losing our mind how he conducted himself during free agency, because he goes out and grabs a guy like JT Compher, and we're like, why are you bringing this guy in and spending this amount of money? Well, now you get it, right? You look back on it and you understand. You've got your first line kind of taken care of. You got your second line taken care of. JT Compher is going to center your third line for you, and you're going to get some decent production from him as your third line center. I think that bodes well. This guy will also, JT Compher will also probably be your first or your second line penalty kill center as well. So you're starting to kind of see how things are working. You look at the additions that they made on defense, bringing in Justin Holland, bringing in Shane Gostisbehere. Those are guys who will be able to play in that top four on your defensive pairings. That helps. Instantly, you start to see this team take on a different shape, and you see this team be able to, at least on paper, elevate their plus minus, be able to put the puck in the net, be able to grab assist and set up plays. And you start to kind of see the vision of this team. And I think adding DeBrincat to that free agent haul, you start to understand, like, okay, this team is going to be much better. DeBrincat is going to be much better. Again, I don't necessarily believe he's going to be able to give you 40 goals, because I don't think Dylan Larkin is an exceptional talent. I think Dylan Larkin is a very good player. I do think DeBrincat is a star. I don't think he's a superstar. I do think he is a star in this league, and I think he'll be playing with a very good player like Dylan Larkin. I think Lucas Raymond has a chance to be a star. I don't know if he'll ever be a superstar, but I do think he has a chance to be a star, but he needs to start taking major steps forward. And maybe if he gets paired on this first line, playing with a guy like DeBrincat, all of a sudden his production goes up, and now we're talking about him in the realm of that star caliber area. I do think the addition of Dylan Larkin, you don't have to worry about his defensive shortcomings. I think those things get worked on during the offseason. I think the way the team is going to be constructed, it's going to help support him. I think what you have is a better understanding of what Steve Yzerman was trying to do and how Steve Yzerman was trying to build this thing. And again, like you said, Yzerman was playing chess. Everybody else is playing checkers. He knew DeBrincat was coming here. Again, he didn't know when he was coming here, but he knew he was going to be here. And he went about his business as if he already had him on his roster. And I think that is such a ballsy move. That is basically walking up to the table and setting your nuts down on the table saying, look, let's play. Let's play. You want to have a dick measuring contest? Here's mine. I'm 14 inches and I'm not even hard. Let's go. And that's what you got. You got a guy who is unwavering in what he wants, in what he's going to do, and a guy who is unwavering in his ability to negotiate, not just with other teams, but with players as well. The big holdup on this whole thing was getting DeBrincat to agree to a 4-year deal at the price point that Yzerman was comfortable with. That was the entire holdup on this whole thing. I think that is awesome. If you're a Red Wings fan, you need to look at your general manager and realize we got a true player. We got a guy who understands the league, understands the system, and knows how to play it. And yeah, he's stubborn as hell. He is a bulldog for sure. And he's going to do whatever it takes to make this team better. And I absolutely love that. And I'm excited for that. I do think this team, if you're looking at a weakness, I still think goaltending is a bit of a weakness for this team. I do like the additions that they made defensively. I do like the additions that they've obviously made offensively. I do have some questions defensively. I don't know what you're going to get out of a guy like James Reimer. I don't know if he's going to be able to put up numbers like he put up, I think it was maybe 3, 4, possibly 5 years ago. I'd have to go back and look at his stats. Alex Lyon, I'm not sure what you're going to get there as well. So it's just kind of looking at the goaltending situation. I've got some concerns. I do have concerns there. But overall, I think as a team is constructed, I think this team is in a really good spot. And I think that the way that Yzerman has gone about his business is absolutely incredible. And I'm excited. I am pumped.
Do you now officially give Steve Yzerman at least an A for the offseason? I think it went from a solid C, and many people looking at it and questioning him going, dude, you didn't really improve the team. What's taking so long? That's all fans want is a little bit of like, hey, a little bit of value for my dollar. Alex DeBrincat is going to put some asses in the seats. That's all you can ask for, and it's a move that makes the team better. That's all you got to ask for is that, hey, do something of value, something to give me a little bit more hope than before. I think he gets at least an A- and arguably an A, maybe if he makes one more move to maybe shore up, and we'll talk about that here in a second.
Yeah, I think so. Look, anytime you can acquire a star player and you don't have to give up a lot. Like I said, I did not like giving up Kubalik. I thought he was a really good player. I thought he was a really good role player. But again, you got to give to get. Anytime you can give up very minimal amount and you can get the star player. And look, going into next year, they still have a first-round draft pick. And whatever draft pick is higher, they still get to use that and keep that. So their draft position is still secure. They're giving away a bonus pick that they got for making other trades. Like, they traded away Tyler Bertuzzi, who they couldn't work out a deal, and I don't necessarily know if he fit into the long-term plan. They traded him away, they got a first-round draft pick, and now that draft pick, they might keep, or they'll probably end up spinning that next year into what they get for DeBrincat. And if you mean to tell me that you gave up Dominic Kubalik and you gave up Tyler Bertuzzi and you got Alex DeBrincat, I would take it all day long. Like, they didn't have to give up a ton to get back a star player. And that's what you got here. And he's young. Like, he is young. By the time his contract's due, when they're going back to the table to renegotiate an extension, he's going to be 29.
Yeah.
Like let that sink in. You got him. He's 26 years old right now. When you go to renegotiate this contract, he will be 29. He'll be going onto year 30. And you kind of have an idea of how Yzerman likes to structure his contracts and what he likes to do. So at that point, he'll probably extend him another 3, maybe 4 years. And it'll probably be somewhere around a price point, somewhere around anywhere between $5 to $7 million a year. Obviously, with that probably tapering off as he gets older. So I think there's a lot of good things here. I think cap-wise, you are in such a good spot because you're able to go out and you're able to bring in a star player, and it doesn't impact your salary cap. You still have $8 million. You can still go out and get another star player like DeBrincat if you wanted to and be able to pay him and be under the cap. Like, That's crazy to me. You can go out and allocate basically another 10% of your salary cap to one more guy if that's what you really wanted to do. And that shows how healthy this team is right now and shows you where this team's at. I think this team is going to make a run on the playoffs. And I think this team is going to be a dangerous team next year. I think going towards the trade deadline, expect the Detroit Red Wings to be buyers and be big-time buyers, looking to get guys who are get a star who's on an expiring contract, get a guy who will basically eat up a chunk of that $8 million that they have. Expect them to go out and play hardball and make a real good push when they get into the playoffs. I'm excited for this team. That's something I haven't been able to say about this team in a very, very long time.
Do they need to kind of add his running mate from the Chicago Blackhawks? Obviously a little bit older. Maybe you can get him for $4 million, $3 million, a little bit cheaper. Would you make a call to potentially Patrick Kane and see what he's got after surgery and say, obviously he was asked a question. DeBrincat said, oh, yeah, my guy Kane, he'll come back stronger than ever. Obviously, last year with the Blackhawks, then eventually ended up with the Rangers. Still basically in the playoffs, averaged a point a game. Now, he's not going to probably be a 50-goal scorer, but you can probably get 60 to 80 points out of him. 1-year deal for Kane. I think, obviously, you could have a situation in which, obviously, Kane knows what DeBrincat brings to the table, but I'm not exactly certain exactly how the Wings are going to use DeBrincat in terms of where in the power play. Maybe it's a good power play 1, power play 2, but I do think that DeBrincat's going to be, obviously, a first-line center, first-line winger, and then you're going to have Kopp moving down a little bit and maybe being on the second line. Do you think Patrick Kane adds something to the Wings, or you say, you know what, just focus on the development of young cats. You don't need anybody else, especially with Buffalo and maybe other teams that maybe probably could say, hey, you're only going to get. I mean, I think Kane could leverage a better contract just by if the Wings had any interest, just by probably getting another year or a couple more dollars with another team.
I think it's going to depend on, look, Patrick Kane had hip resurfacing surgery. So basically they pull out like if you look at your hand, take your hand, make a fist, put your fist into your other hand. So that ball, the fist part of it, they basically took that ball from his hip and they basically cut it off and they put a metal prosthetic there. So he's got a little bit of physical therapy and he's got some rehab he's got to do. So depending on how he comes back medically and depending on where this team is when he's ready to go, I don't have a problem with them bringing him in. Look, I think a guy like Patrick Kane, even though he's a little bit older and even though some of his play is starting to decline, I still think he is probably better than 80 to 87% of the league. I think this is still a guy who commands respect. This is a guy who still has elite vision. This is a guy who still has a really great shot. It's whether or not he can skate and he will be durable enough to endure the what comes with playing in an NHL season. So yeah, I would be obviously open to that conversation. Could you imagine bringing him in and you have Larkin, Kane, and DeBrincat on a line? Like instantly that line right there looks like something you would see at an All-Star game. Like that would be awesome. On top of that, you could then move Raymond down to your second line with Kopp, and that line instantly gets stronger, gets better. So you've got pieces, you've got guys you can kind of move around then. I would be totally open to it, and I would love it. But again, it's going to depend on where he's at in his rehab, when he's ready to go, and kind of where the Red Wings are at in this process. Again, I do believe this is going to be a dangerous team, so I think that they should have these conversations. I think Steve Yzerman, if he's smart, and obviously he is, I think he's already probably stuck a toe in that water, and he's kind of feeling it out and trying to kind of see what's going on there. But could you imagine bringing a guy like Patrick Kane in? And here's the thing. For those who don't know, Patrick Kane basically grew up in the backyard here. He was part of the Little Caesars hockey program. He spent a ton of time here. He was part of the whole honey baked ham. He was part of the Detroit hockey scene for the juniors. So he was part of all of that. So it'd almost be like a homecoming for him as well. So look, I am all about it if they're able to go out and negotiate a contract for him. If you were looking to bring a guy like Patrick Kane in, where would you feel comfortable at as far as a contract? Would it be like 1 year, $5 million? Would it be something more along the lines of 2, maybe 3 years, somewhere right around 10 to maybe $17 million? How would you, where's your comfort level? And again, mind you, this team has a little bit over $8 million in salary cap space. I think they've got something like 8.1 in salary cap, easy for me to say, salary cap space. I'll try it again.
No, probably less than 4 million. You got it. You got enough. Less than 4, probably 3. 1 year prove it deal situation, maybe an option. Give a team option or a player option, whatever makes them feel more comfortable. I just feel like another team could give him more. 35 years old. I just don't see it happening. But it's interesting because obviously of the tie that he has to DeBrincat, and probably a little text maybe would be sent behind the scenes like, hey, Kane would obviously love to come to Detroit, but would he want to come to a rebuild at 35, knowing that it's not going to be a 1 year thing? So there's a lot of factors that would preclude that from happening, but it's fun to talk about. It's fun to acquire players. It's always fun to play GM, no matter if the idea is outlandish, like bringing in Nylander, or if it's maybe even more realistic, like bringing in Kane. Playing GM in hockey, football, baseball is very fun, and that's why
would it be to bring Nylander here.
Oh, I would have to change my pants. That'd be great. So it's always fun to always want to add to your team, and that's why everyone does it. That's why people debate it. That's why it's talked about on podcasts or stories pop up regarding, hey, what about that guy? It's just always fun to do. So, but finally, the Wings played the game a little bit with a guy that we all wanted to bring here. So the talk was there, and we got a chance now to talk half an hour about Wings hockey. I love it. It just flew by. We could talk for another 2 hours about what the Wings did. But finally, they took a step forward, and now we can even keep our eyes even that much closer on the Red Wings. Now, you turn the page a little bit, and I think juxtaposed with the fact that Yzerman basically stole from Ottawa, APB, Yzerman stole. I love the gif of a lot of people are putting out the one where they have Yzerman sitting at the phone and he's like, don't say anything, this is a robbery. I love it. I see it like 50 times, and each time I just look at it for 2 seconds. I just love it. Go look at it on Twitter. I got to post it somewhere in some kind of way, in a creative way, but I just love it. And now you look at it and everyone's like, whoa, Troy Weaver, put your money back in your pocket, damn it. You just wanted to whip out your pocketbook and spend $16 million a year on Isaiah Stewart, beef stew. Look, it's an overpay, but the debate is he going to actually get up to the point where he can earn it, where it will be a valuable deal? It's kind of like the Matthew Stafford in a very, very loose way, where people said, look, he's getting paid $27 million. In about 5 years, it's going to be dwarfed. And within 2 years, it was dwarfed. All the top quarterbacks started making 30, 35, 40, but because, and here's the way I think, guys, and I think I've said this multiple times, but I'm going to say it again. Just because a reporter says, well, every general manager would have gave him $16 million, that's the going rate. Guys, there really are only 3-4 decent GMs, and the rest are trash. They get fired because they do what everybody else does. They follow the thing. You know what I mean? They don't do video podcasts. They don't do podcasts. They do traditional media, and they get blown out. You have to understand that to be a great general manager, you got to kind of make some moves. And when you're given all that cap space and you give me Isaiah Stewart and Joe Harris, bro, I am limp as can be. It ain't hard. It ain't working. It ain't excited. It's like, what the hell? You saved all that cap space.
Steve Yzerman coming to the table, setting your nuts on the table,
exactly.
And being 14 inches soft.
Exactly. It's like, what the hell is this? You used your cap space this year, and I guess it's not as good as next year's, but I would say that Isaiah Stewart has a lot of flaws that would preclude me from paying him $16 million. I would only pay him 10. And you did it early. You had no reason to do it. Like, it's your favorite guy. I get it. There was no real reason to do it early. And because it's the first time that in Tom Gores' era, a rookie has signed an extension. Get the hell out of here. And it's Isaiah Stewart. He's the guy. He's a guy. He's a good player. He's a role player. But role players in the NBA should not be making $16 million. And other general managers would do it. It's not crazy, but it's not a steal. And when you see what Yzerman did,
let that sink in.
It's not a steal at all.
Let that sink into you. That's the disparity between the NBA and the NHL.
Yes.
In the NHL, a guy had to fight and argue with the GM to get $7.8 million. In the NBA, you're a role player, and they're just handing you a $16 million extension. Here you are. It was a $32 million extension, wasn't it?
I don't know. I just saw $16 million per. I think it's a couple years.
It was $64 million. I'm sorry. It's $16 million per. So like they're just handing out money to role players. Look, when I read this, when this news came across my phone, I was like, "Are you serious?" Like out loud, I was like, "Are you serious? Like you got to be shitting me." And Alyssa was standing next to me. She's like, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" I was like, "The Pistons just extended Isaiah Stewart 4 years, $64 million." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Yeah, my reaction exactly. Okay. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we doing this?" I have no idea what Troy Weaver's plans were when he went into free agency, and I still have no clue. To me, what Troy Weaver has done in his time here in Detroit is a complete baffling mystery. Like, you can't get credit for drafting Cade. Cade was the guy. He was supposed to go number one, right? Wasn't really a choice there. Everything else that he has done since then, I don't know. Like Ivy, I feel like was the logical pick too. Like you and I could have picked that. You and I could have done that. We could have drafted Cade. We could have drafted Ivy. Do you get credit for Jalen Duren? Sure, I'll give you credit for Jalen Duren. But after that, what has he really done here? Like if you look at his drafts and you look at his free agent moves, this team doesn't really feel like it's any further along than when he took over. You know, like. We talked about this. It might have been last week, might have been 2 weeks ago. Cade Cunningham getting hurt really kind of sets back the timeline for what he wants to do because you just don't know where he's going. And usually, if you are a star player or you are a superstar player, you take that monster jump between year one and year two. He was banged up in year one. He was even more banged up in year two. So now you're going into year three, and you're like, I'm not really sure what we're going to get here. And I don't know how he's going to necessarily mesh with this team. So I get all of that. But that being said, you as the general manager, you should have a pretty good idea of what you have as far as guys going on the floor and guys playing. And you should be able to help offset the talent that they have and bring in guys who can kind of make up for any deficiencies that they might have and help strengthen them. I haven't seen him do that. I haven't seen him go out and do any of that. And yeah, look, I get Isaiah Stewart's in a couple of years, his deal, we might look back at it and be like, yeah, that's a steal. Like they got a steal for him. That was smart. But right now, I just don't see it. Like this is a guy who is I think he's like a sub 32% 3-point shooter. He's basically a big who really hasn't developed that outside shot. And the game has changed. The game has evolved. I mean, you've seen who went number one in the draft this year. It is essentially a guy who should be playing center, but can dribble the ball like a point guard and can shoot three-pointers. Like the three-pointer has become so critical to the game of basketball. When you go out and you draft guys who can't hit threes, all you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot. It's like going out there and trying to play with one hand tied behind your back. You need these guys to be able to have that requisite skill because that is what is separating the really good teams from just the guys who are kind of filling out the bottom of the playoff roster. So, like, what are you doing here? I haven't seen Troy Weaver go out and do anything of note since he's been here. And this move right here is incredibly frustrating because I think this move right here just kind of encapsulates everything that we've been bitching about and everything we've kind of seen since Troy Weaver has been here. And I think that's why there's a bit of a frustration with it. And I just don't understand the move. I don't feel like this needed to get done now. This is a move you probably could have put off until later on.
Yeah. One more year. See what he can do in the mix of the players you got.
Yeah. And look, I understand that maybe Monte Williams likes what he has with Isaiah Stewart or likes what he brings to the table. But maybe you find out he doesn't necessarily fit the role that you need him to play. Or maybe there's something there that just doesn't work. I just don't feel like this needed to get done right now. You could have waited. And I just, again, man, Troy Weaver is incredibly frustrating for me. Like, I don't know what these Pistons are going to be. I have no read on how this team is getting built or what this team actually needs to be competitive. To me, it feels like you've got a bunch of guys and everybody showed up and they're going to play basketball, and you've got a basketball and you're rolling it out on the court and you're going to play shirts versus skins. And that's what you got here. That's how this team is basically being put together. Yeah. And to me, that's not what you do. That's not how you build a team. You know, we crucified Steve Yzerman a couple weeks ago, last week even, for the moves he made during free agency. You fast forward a week, he gets the major centerpiece of his build done. He gets it all completed. And now you have a vision. You have an understanding of what he was doing during free agency. I have no clue what Troy Weaver is doing with this team. I have no clue what the centerpiece is supposed to be. We all think it's supposed to be Cade, but nobody knows. And you don't even know what Cade's going to be. Cade doesn't even know what Cade's going to be. And you look at how this team is being basically piecemealed together. And honestly, it looks like you and I took some super glue and some duct tape to a vase that we broke playing soccer inside our mom's house, and now we got to try to fix it. It looks bad, man. This team looks so whack right now. It is incredibly frustrating watching what Troy Weaver is doing with these Pistons. Hopefully he knows what the hell he's doing, because I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I think now you got to kind of, for Troy Weaver, it basically, for him, he gets the benefit of the doubt because Cade got hurt. He gets another year. Basically, this is kind of the 2022 year for the Wings that the Pistons are going through this year. You got to see what you got. You got to kind of see what these pieces look like, and you got to kind of compete at a certain level. And if they can compete all the way up until the playoffs and maybe fall off, then you'll be okay with it. But if it completely, you have another 20 to 25 win season and you still can't shoot and you still can't defend, then this is going to start to be something where, remember guys, OKC brushed this guy off and said, look, there's some issues here with his drafting. And you could start to say that Troy Weaver needs to kind of move this along and start to show a little bit about what this is about, you know, and getting guys with a lot of holes in their game that are young and hoping that they develop. Hopefully maybe the influence of Monty Williams will help Isaiah Stewart. Obviously he's a try-hard guy. He's a good role player, but $16 million and up should be reserved for players that is Isaiah Stewart. I don't even think he's good as Bogdanovich, and he's making 20 because he's a three-point expert. So we'll see how this plays out. But right now, Troy Weaver is firmly being questioned and is on the hot seat. It's more lukewarm and hot than I think any other general manager in Detroit sports right now. And to continue our basically look around the league GMs, the Detroit GMs around town, the next one on the list, obviously Brad Holmes gets a lot of credit, and we'll talk about the Lions next week in regards to prepping for training camp, which is upcoming very quickly. Next week we'll have a thorough Lions discussion regarding concerns and all that kind of stuff. So Brad Holmes gets out of the crosshairs this week in regards to the GM spotlight. Scott Harris made a move that I think was real interesting because it was one of our first glimpses regarding what the Tigers are doing. Many people were like, we are tired of the Tigers losing. Langford, that's the guy. He's ready. He's a player that can contribute probably in 2024 right away. Don't have to wait. Instead, the front office and the personnel department, obviously they've added people that have worked with the, I believe, Tampa Bay Rays. And when you look at what they've done in the history of building up their young talent, they took a lot of high school prospects. So that's what the Tigers have started to do in regards to drafting younger players that need more seasoning. So I understand the reaction of a lot of fans that were like, no, we don't want to wait 3 more years for a player. You need players now, like yesterday. We need a player to plug in right now to hit the damn baseball. But when you look at what everybody has said that has watched him and scouted who the Tigers drafted at number 3, by all accounts, it's a player that's on par with Riley Green and maybe even better. So with that said, personally, I would have been okay with either. I think Clark or Langford. But I understand the angst when you see the fact that people are like, damn, we don't want to wait anymore, and waiting for the Tigers to get good is just too hard to do. You can't go through this long-term rebuild, especially when 3 other teams are doing the same thing And I understand the angst because when you see who Langford went to, Texas, and you're like, shit, they always produce good hitters, and he's probably going to be somebody that is going to contribute probably right away for a good offensive team. Max Clark, I like his swagger, I like his bravado. He could be an outfielder that fits Comerica Park. So while I know some people say that Scott Harris maybe missed the mark in regards to going with Clark, I don't think that it's going to be that detrimental. I don't think Langford's just going to blow up and then Clark is going to be a bust. Green is hitting, and you realize that sometimes taking high school players and letting them marinate through the system can be something solid. But cuz I gotta take your temperature check. How patient are you waiting now to see a bunch of young cats that the Tigers are drafting, waiting for them to get through the system, because it's coming. You see a lot of good talent that's in the minors in AAA right now, and that's a good sign. And Scott Harris basically is like, hey, I get to take advantage and build this major league club the way I want to.
I was surprised that they took a high school bat.
Yeah.
I was excited that they didn't take a pitcher because this team needs production in the field, right? They need bats. I thought for sure it was going to be Langford. I was surprised that it was Clark. Now, like you said, you listen to what everybody has said about Clark. Any other year, he's going number one. He's supposed to be the guy. He's basically like the Mike Trout of any other year's draft. You know what I'm saying? So I guess from a philosophical standpoint, I don't necessarily vibe with taking the high school bat. I would have took the college bat because you can get them up here faster. But I think what Scott Harris is telling you is, I have a vision for what I'm doing. I am going to go about this my own way, and I have no rush. I have no timeline on this. We can kind of go about this almost at my leisure, because this team was left in such dire straits that, hey, if we luck up and we make it to the playoffs this year, which I don't think he has any expectations that they're making it to the playoffs this year. If we luck up and we make it to the playoffs this year, cool. But we're not really trying to do that. We're trying to basically approach this the same way Steve Yzerman approached this a couple of years ago, where you're going to slowly build things up through your developmental system, and then you're going to start to put guys into the league. They're going to basically elevate themselves one league system at a time up until they get to the pros. He's not into rushing anybody up. And you've seen what happens when you rush a guy. Like Torkelson was supposed to be the second coming of Christ at first base. Torkelson, I don't know if he's read a manual or a pamphlet to learn how to swing a baseball bat, because it hasn't really worked out real well. So maybe he needs to go ahead and do that. So that could kind of be blamed on rushing him, bringing him up too soon, maybe putting so much of that pressure on him, and just him not being able to handle it, him being a little bit too young to handle it when that happened. So, like you said, Clark is supposed to be better than Riley Green. Riley Green got up to the majors in 3 years? So maybe Clark does it in 2.5. We'll have to wait and see. I think what you've got is you're building a team with some dudes who can rake in the outfield, and then I think he will kind of take care of the infield as need be. But it's one of those things where if you're looking for the Tigers to be really good next year or the year after that, you're going to have to wait.
This is it. This is rock bottom.
Scott Harris told you.
This is rock bottom, and it's tough, man. It's tough. It is tough to see that this is basically the start of another rebuild that's going to take 4 or 5 years, and there's no easy fixes. You don't just get superstars. You got to draft and develop. And that's what Scott Harris is like, yes, these are great opportunities. While others might walk away from that. Dude, you're guaranteed at least 5 years of a multi-million-dollar contract. So it's unbelievable. But I understand you have people in place that have worked with organizations that have developed players. You have a system in place that you believe in. You have a park that you got to kind of look to see which players will fit your system. And many believe that Clark fits Comerica a lot better than Langford, who's a big bopper bat. That it's a right-handed bat. So that doesn't fit exactly with what's going on at Comerica Park. So I get it. Left-handed bats are a little bit more coveted. So I could see the reasoning. It's not a major violation, but I love the debate, and that's what sports is about. You're not supposed to just be like, Tigers drafted Clark, yay, clap, and then just don't ever question it or don't ever look at who else was out there. and those that say, "Oh, we got to just love beef stew." No, the idea is to sit and debate, talk about it. It's not a violation to debate sports. That's what makes it fun. It really, the most boring accounts I think that are out there are those that are just like, wait and see. It's all good. Scott Harris knows more than you. Well, okay, yeah, he's doing it. But if I spent, 24 hours a day and wanted to go down that road of being an executive, I would like to think that some talent would be developed at some point. So the opportunity to debate is never a bad thing. It's never wrong to have an oppositional view. And sometimes I think that fans should be that way. They should be like, look, and I think part of the reason why they don't is half of you fans can't even afford to get out there anymore. So you're just sitting there like, I ain't going out to the games anyway. Ain't hurting my pocket. Well, some of us want to go out there. Some of us want to get out of the house and pay some money, but we want some value for it. And if you're going to keep charging 15% more year over year over year, and we're not getting no return, then you're going to have some pissed off customers. So I understand those that are hardcore fans, and it doesn't make you any less of a fan that you want to debate. That's the whole point, is that you have to question these GMs. You have to say, hey, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? It's never wrong. And it's as long as you're respectful, as long as you feel that, hey, your investment is not being, fulfilled in the way that you want, then it's all good to question. That's what we built this whole platform on, basically, at Detroit Podcast, Adam and I, is to question what's going on with these teams, because throughout the course of our podcast, as we had this GM spotlight this week, there have been not one, and we've said it before, not one single playoff series win in the decade we've been doing this podcast. And that is crazy to think about. The more I say it, the more it comes into fruition that we should be questioning. Why are you doing this? Why have you thought this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? And I love the fact that we have a little bit of a seat at the table with the Lions to ask those questions, because we don't have to have any fear regarding anything. You just ask the questions that should be asked. And I love the fans that debate, that have these type of healthy debates online, and we can still have them. And I'm so glad the Tigers were on break this week. It was so good to refresh a little bit, to kind of do a spotlight on where these organizations are at. I think it's good. I think that we now know all these teams are in rebuilds. The Wings now are firmly in second in their rebuild behind the Lions. And now you have the Pistons, I think, inching their way just a little bit ahead of the Tigers, because they have some first-round talent that has been added. Now we get to see 3 years of drafts with Troy Weaver that we can kind of look at, with Cade, with Ivy and Duran, and now with Oscar Thompson and Marcus Sasser. We can start to see a little bit of what is going on. So it was I love the slow time. I know some people don't like it. I love it. It gives us a chance to do a spotlight and a check-in, and really to explore what's been going on. But boy, I think we all needed in Detroit sports the jolt that we got with Steve Yzerman. And I think we like Troy Weaver as well, making moves, at least doing something that he believes is right. We can criticize it, but he's taking his swing. I'm more on the side of, I think if you're going to buy stock, buy it in Yzerman and kind of hold it with Troy Weaver. Don't buy any more. But it was good, man, and it was good to check in, talking Detroit sports. Being it's a slow time these next 4 days, are you diverting a little bit away from sports and just doing personal stuff?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah,
just trying to find things to kind of stay occupied.
Yes.
Just try to hit the reset button. We normally, it's weird because normally this time of year when we're trying to put these shows together, it is sometimes a struggle because there's not a whole lot going on. This wasn't the case.
Nope.
Like as slow as a sports week as this was,
not as slow.
There was definitely stuff for us to talk about, which was nice.
It was very nice. And I think that's always great in Detroit sports, is that the lulls are less, and there's always something to talk about, especially with the teams where they're at, all rebuilding and all making decisions that garner attention. That's what makes Detroit sports great, is that more podcasts are coming out, more podcasts. I saw a podcast trying to report that they had sources, that was great. I thought that, seeing Elliot Friedman respond to a podcast was classic. And I was just like, these podcasters are swinging. I love it.
I've seen that too. And I was like, what are you doing?
I listen, with that, it wasn't that hard to take a swing to say that DeBrincat was coming. All signs of speculation would indicate that, hey, he doesn't like Ottawa. He's from Detroit. He likes it. There's no movement. There's been plenty of reports it was the Islanders or the Red Wings. So nobody in God's green earth would have thought that he'd go to the Islanders. So it wouldn't have been that hard to say, hey, I got information that, and there's so much information out there that everybody had a source. We all were reading Friedman. We all were reading the Times. We all were in the mix knowing that, okay, DeBrincat, it's probably 50-50 or even higher that he was coming. So I thought that was great. Hey, do it. Hey, listen, if you got to do what you got to do in this day and age. And if you're going to take swings, can't be wrong, but you don't get as much credit for saying what most people could naturally assume. So, and especially technically it was wrong. It wasn't close. There were 48 hours away is not technically close, but it's all speculation and stuff like that. I like swingers, and I like those that take swings and try things and give it a whirl, and it's all fun. But in the world of sports, it's great. More websites are coming out covering the Lions. The Lions have 15 different beat writers, and if you want a story of the Lions, you're going to find it 15 different places. But here's what's great is because they have the video player and we do videos, a lot of those sites, it's beneficial because they're plopping me and Vito's face on their websites. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Now me and Vito's videos are on 16 different websites, and now we can't hate on all the other ones because they feature our videos. So it all benefits us. So it's just crazy with the most well-covered teams are Detroit sports teams, and we thank you for giving us a little slice of the pie, letting us talk Detroit sports. It's always fun. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Our time is coming to a close this week. It's been a fun summer, and now, we ramp it up as we are now 10 days away from Detroit Lions training camp. The battles begin. And check out All Lions, where this is talking season, and NFL players right now, the current hot topic is the defensive backs rankings. All the defensive backs are butthurt. They don't like Sauce Gardner being second. Did a little research. They just are debating, how the media impacts rankings and how they pumped it up, and fan bases defending these rankings. And it's kind of fun to look at. And one of the Lions can't help but chirp, and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he wants his name in the mix. He's got a big ego. And so now the fan bases are taking sides, and Twitter is all ablaze. And it's fun. Talking season is fun, especially if NFL players are going to get in the mix and start talking about it. So make sure you check out All Lions, Detroit Sports Podcast. Anywhere at all that you listen to your favorite audio content, type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Because podcasting time is always great. I look forward to the hours we spend together. And let's kick it up again next week on the latest edition of Doc and Jock.